So Glacioclasm is back this year with some new roles that I wanted us to discuss. Now, fusion rifles have actually had a lot of changes this year, especially these high impact fusions. No longer do they shoot 7 bolts per burst, it's now 5, and its charge time actually got increased to 1,000, meaning it is a hefty, and I mean a hefty charge time in between shots. Now, this is something that's super noticeable inside of PvP, which is why main ingredient and other precision fusion rifles are pretty much the meta. However, there is a few roles that we're going to be discussing inside of PvP that do work for Glacioclasm. But before we get into that, I want to talk about this PvE role right here that Cookie allowed us to get on his account and play with. And by the way, big shout out to Cookie, who also shared with me that him and his friend love Destiny, and we're actually big fans here of the channel. His friend passed away a few months ago from COVID. My prayers go out to you, Cookie, as well as your friend Tim there. I appreciate all the love, and thank you so much for sharing that with me. Now, with all that being said, let's talk about this god role that Cookie locked down, which is this one right here. And this was the role that intrigued me the most going into the dawning yesterday, and that is this Subsistence Reservoir Burst role. Now, there are so many things that have changed with both of these perks, but this role right here is like loaded question, but on roids. Subsistence essentially allows you to reload your weapon upon getting a kill, and pretty much you will stay at max ammo or max shots in your magazine as long as you are getting a kill. Now, this is something not difficult for Reservoir Bursts, as when the battery is full, your next burst deals additional damage and causes the enemies to explode on death. Now, that increase in damage is pretty nice. We're talking a 25% increase right out the gate at the top of that magazine. And what's so beautiful about Reservoir Burst is that it stacks with other things. Charge with Light and that 20% buff stacks here. And that combination of Charge with Light and Reservoir Burst is a 50% buff there in damage. And on top of that, we have a mod this season called Particle Deconstruction, which actually gives us a 40% debuff on our enemies. This too stacks with Charge with Light and Reservoir Burst, in total giving us a whopping 110% increase in damage. Now, this was a fantastic role for clearing ads. Something I complain about when it comes to No Composure is that it just doesn't have enough damage to get the one-shot kill, depending on the difficulty of the activity you are doing. What this results in is you having to stop, reload, to finally get the kill on that target, to then see that beautiful void explosion. But Reservoir Burst present on a high-impact weapon, especially when we combine it with perks like Liquid Coils, which also increases our damage. I know that charge time also gets increased, but you want the most damage there on the front end. However, is this the god role? Something I was running into, especially when doing damage tests, was that Subsistence was extremely nice when paired with Reservoir Burst if you got the kill. The problem was when you happen to hit a higher health target, champions, Carl, mini bosses, and bosses, you're going to run into a situation where you're obviously not going to be able to get the kill. Therefore, Reservoir Burst and that 25% buff is only going to be taken advantage of on that first shot, requiring you either to reload or lose out on that 25% buff. However, Glacioclasm this year also rolls with Slide Shot. Slide Shot reloads the weapon, would essentially top everything off, and what this allows you to do, by simply sliding, this will constantly keep Reservoir Burst procced, meaning that 110% damage that you're doing to that target, no matter how thick he may be, you can consistently keep doing. All you have to do is just slide in between shots. And considering the charge time, you can be pre-charging as you're sliding, right? This is a very long charge time weapon. So as you're sliding, go ahead and start pre-charging for the enemy. I know we don't have a roll of this, as the only roll we got to play with was this Slide Shot Reservoir Burst roll, and my RNG is terrible, but Slide Shot is definitely the way to go here. I think Subsistence is still a good play and still a great combination there with Reservoir Burst if you're just clearing out ads with the occasional high health target. Slide Shot is just for the people that want that perfect roll, which honestly would be fantastic in Grandmasters right now, especially with Particle Deconstruction. So to me, guys, that is the god roll for PvE, is that Slide Shot, Reservoir Burst roll, Liquid Coils. Go ahead and buff that damage up as much as you can. For those that think that Dragonfly spec still buffs the damage here of your fusion rifle and Reservoir Burst, no, it does not. I just wanted to remind everyone because that seems to be something that still comes up even today. Now let's talk PvP. I actually landed a couple rolls here that were interesting, primarily this Surplus roll with high impact reserves. Now Surplus is really good on so many weapons, and I didn't know if I was gonna like it or not on a fusion rifle, but considering this is a high impact fusion and they are pretty slow in the handling department and their stability is lacking, Surplus is actually fantastic here. I'm rocking like a Firebolt grenade build, which has the fastest cooldown amongst grenades, and essentially that in combination with my build, I always had at least 2 or 3 abilities up. Now these are some ginormous bumps there in stats. We're talking 50 in handling being added, 25 in stability, increase in reload speed. The main thing though is the handling and stability bumps. These are the things that are noticeable, especially when trying to stretch Glacioclasm out to get that one-hit kill. Now inside of Crucible, fusion rifles are only doing somewhere around 62 to is 63 damage per bolt. These are high impacts. Mercules has actually got in this chart that there's 62 per bolt. I know the game shows 63, but we know how Destiny is in its numbers, so it's safe to assume there's some rounding. But with that 62 damage per bolt, you're really only going to get a kill on Guardians, 1 resilience or less with 3 bolts. So 3 of the 5 bolts have to land. And considering you got things like flinch, target strafing on you, that can be difficult, especially when you start to get into that 20-meter range. This is where high impact reserves comes in because it buffs that damage up. And what's so beautiful about the ammo economy inside of Crucible is that as soon as you spawn, high impact reserves is already procced, and it gets deadlier the deeper into your magazine you go. So at 2 shots left in your magazine, that damage actually jumps up to about 64-65. Now we'll play it safe. We'll say there's some rounding there and just say 63-64. Understand though, when we say 63-64, that's still a big bump in the Guardians that you can kill. Just 63 damage per bolt now allows you to kill Guardians in 3 bolts at 4 resilience or less. And then to notch it up even higher, on the final shot of high impact reserves, we're talking 64-65. And just to be conservative here, that's still 192 damage from 3 bolts, allowing you to kill Guardians 6 resilience or less. High impact reserves on Glacioclasm is actually huge here. That in combination with surplus was really nice. My only suggestion when rocking a roll like this is to never reload to full capacity in your magazine, as you'll be losing out on high impact reserves if you're anywhere north of 2 shots. Granted, there's some manipulation you can do with like backup mag and some magazine perks, but just base, you want to get the kill first. If you happen to pick up some green, don't immediately reload, get that final shot off and then reload. Try to always keep it at 2 rounds, even if you have to burn a shot. Now, was this the god roll for PvP? Well, it was nice. However, there is some other things, especially in that first trait column, that are also just as good as surplus. One of them, of course, being slide shot. This bumps not only the range, but the stability. Now, this is nice because it actually bumps on an extra 20 range and 30 stability. However, to me, I think slide shot has too small of a window of activation. And considering the charge time of Glacioclasm here at 1,000, even if you perfectly pre-charge, I'm not even certain if you're fully going to be able to take advantage of slide shot. Now, the other trait, though, that has pretty much always been the go-to trait for me on fusion rifles is, of course, under pressure. Now, under pressure, similar to high impact reserves, is able to take advantage of the ammo economy inside of Crucible. When you spawn and you only have 2 shots in your magazine, your weapon now has anywhere between 25 to 50% increase in both accuracy and up to 20 extra stability. Now, accuracy is really important for a lot of different weapons, but with the most recent change to fusion rifles, Bungie actually called out that fusion rifles were behaving almost in a projectile way, meaning they weren't actually hit scan. They've since made that change, and this is something more noticeable for people that play at higher frames. Regardless though, fusion rifles are behaving more as a hit scan weapon than they were previously, which is why a perk like under pressure and that bump there in accuracy really helps here. So it's a big toss up between under pressure and surplus for me. And my suggestion would be, if you are rocking longer cooldowns in your abilities, say you're playing Arc Strider, where you're expending your flux grenade constantly, as well as your dodge constantly, and you're not gonna have more than 1 ability up at all times, then I would suggest dropping surplus and just choosing under pressure, especially given the fact that fusion rifles are behaving more as hit scan weapons now than ever before. That accuracy bump is gonna go a long way here. Now, speaking of kill range, we do need to talk about what the potential kill range is on Glacioclasm. For me, there seems to be a very hard cutoff at about 23 meters. Now, there is ways you can manipulate this. Maybe an under pressure roll would have actually added enough accuracy to bring those bolts together, but I am rocking surplus ×3 with high impact reserves, and 22.5 meters was the furthest I was able to get a kill. Now, we know from main ingredient that precisions can match that, if not beat, the kill range that you're seeing right here with Glacioclasm, and they have a faster charge time. And from my experience, especially inside of Crucible, when an enemy is sitting there strafing in front of you and shooting you at the same time with a primary weapon, it's a good chance you're not going to get that 22.5 meter kill anyways. You really want to keep everything 20 meters or less. So the reality is that Glacioclasm, like most high impacts, are just not at the top of the food chain when it comes to the meta inside of PvP. They're good options, and there were times that I was pleasantly surprised by it. And with a role like high impact reserves under pressure or surplus high impact reserves, I think you'll be able to make a play with it. Now, the other 2 damage perks that I want to bring up is, of course, Backup Plan and Harmony. Backup Plan actually drops your damage down to 50 per bolt, which will now require 100% to land 4 bolts out of the 5, but it grants you a reduction there in charge time. Now, that reduction in charge time is supposed to be somewhere around a 20% reduction, so a little less than like precisions. It also maxes out the handling, which is nice, and there were a few times that Backup Plan did catch Guardians off guard. I'm a little spoiled here, guys, because we used to play with Backup Plan back in the day on OG Aranto, when it didn't reduce your damage at all, and it significantly dropped that charge time. It was busted for sure. In this situation, I had to ask myself, why use backup plan when I could just use main ingredient, both of which essentially has the same charge time, yet base main ingredient, despite it not doing more damage per bolt, shoots 7 bolts. So you can't compare it on a bolt to bolt comparison. Now, the other trait that was interesting was Harmony. Harmony actually has a lot of forgiveness, and say for instance, you get a kill with a primary weapon, you actually have 3 seconds after getting that kill to then swap to the weapon that has Harmony to then gain a 20% damage buff for 7 whole seconds. Now, I mistakenly said yesterday that I thought that Glacioclasm would get the 2 bolt kill, but that's not the case. The damage actually cranks up somewhere between 74 and 75 damage per bolt, which, as beautiful as that is, still requires 3 bolts to get the kill. Now, granted, it could extend that kill range, but my personal experience with Harmony was that it was present on a weapon that required me to swap to it and then charge this really long charge time to then get a kill. And I just felt like it didn't perform the way I wanted it to. If you're going to use this fusion rifle, or any high impact for that matter, you have to use it very offensively. I talk about the shotgun ape that runs around with a shotgun in his hands at all times and never uses a primary weapon. That's essentially the concept, the mentality you have to have here when using a high impact weapon. Because of the charge time, you have to constantly be baiting. You have to constantly be pre-charging and literally draw the enemies to you. And any time that is lost from swapping weapons, this runs into issues with the charge time. And I found myself in situations where I'm literally halfway charged up, swapping to this weapon, and I die. So again, personal opinion, guys, on this, if you want to make high impacts work for you inside of PvP, under pressure, surplus, high impact reserves. So guys, that is our review there for Glacioclasm. There's some things here I really did like, and out of all the high impact fusions, Glacioclasm really does feel the best to me. It even feels better to me than what Erentil used to feel. Where it stands out the most though, currently, is definitely with its PvE role. That Reservoir Burst Subsistence combo, or that Slide Shot Reservoir Burst combo, is fantastic. My only suggestion for the magazine perk is to rock Liquid Coils with Reservoir Burst, and for PvP, I found that Particle Repeater is like the full choke for fusions. I would suggest rocking that on any of your rolls. As far as like Recoil Direction overall for PvP for more consistency, you are looking at about a 78 in Recoil Direction, meaning it does have some slight drift there to the right. Honestly, base, that's not that bad. As in, you don't have to overcommit here to say something like Arrowhead Break to max out that Recoil Direction. You can if you want. Personally, I like to rock freehand grip on my fusion just so I can have faster ready speed, and for the off chance that I do have someone too close to me, I can fire from the hip for that increase in accuracy. Just my suggestion, guys. Overall, Glacioclasm has some impressive rolls, so good luck grinding out there. There's never been a better time to farm for it, and you can target it with one of the presents there with Eva at the tower, so good luck. Fellas and ladies, thank you all for coming and watching, and as always,
Slap that like button like your mama told you right.